who is Tim Walz exactly? Most of us, I just want to say, I think he's like, should be investigated by the sex crimes unit. I really feel that way. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but he's one of the creepiest people I've ever seen. The vibe I get off that guy, I would not let him in my house. That's just my feeling. Maybe I'm being totally unfair, in which case I apologize. But you have the facts. I don't. Who is this guy?
Yeah, I think so much of this has happened on the watch of Governor Walz. Again, I'm talking about, I've lived in Minnesota for most of my life at this point as a reporter there for 20 years. Just never born, raised, spent a little time outside of the state and been back for 20 years now. But I've just never seen, this kind of, I don't even know if you can call it leadership. I'm not exactly sure. Manipulation by a leader. Again, we've talked about this capital of chaos. This has all been under his watch. But we've done so much reporting over at Alpha News with the truth of this guy. It was interesting to see others finally report about him because the local media will not when he was picked as the VP candidate for Kamala Harris. But it started sort of with picking up on just these little lies he would tell. And these are things that we would report on. He did not... he never was a command sergeant major, despite the fact him, saying that he was. He never attained this rank in the military. Instead, he abandoned his troops and they were deployed to Iraq without him, and he ran for Congress. So I've always felt as a reporter, if someone lies about little things, they're lying about big things. I think that's that's a principle that stands the test of time. And you kind of would just see this with little things that he would say that was just not reality. But Minnesota has become, the home of this defund the police movement. It was on the ballot. Minneapolis did not vote to defund the police, but I would say in every way, shape, or form, they defunded the police. You have the Minneapolis Police Department that's lost about 40% of their cops since George Floyd. But instead of being
Minneapolis lost 40% of its cops in 5 years?
Nearly half, yeah. And I actually think we're just now getting to the point of, you thought there were problems with the police 5 years ago? Just wait until you see some of these people that are coming up on the job.
Who's going to be a cop now?
Exactly. It's pretty horrifying. And I don't blame any of these people for leaving. But they're just
hiring criminals. It'll just be a criminal gang. Yeah, that's happened before.
So under Walz, we have the riots. We have these lies just about things with his background that I think really deserve more attention, more investigating. These ties to China, which I think are troubling.
What ties does he have to China?
Well, we know himself, he said that he's made more than 30 trips to China. He went there upon graduating.
30 trips to China?
Went there upon graduating.
That's a long flight. And he's spent his life as like a school teacher.
He's from Nebraska originally.
What is a school teacher from Nebraska doing making 30 trips to China?
And in the National Guard at the time as well, making these trips to China. We also know he started
But what's that? First of all, it's really
agency.
Expensive. It's time consuming. It's not something that happens. You don't go to China 30 times unless you have a real reason to do that. What would that reason be?
He was taking kids over there at one point as a travel agency. But what's interesting is I've spoken to... Who let
their kids travel with Tim Walz?
I've spoken to a few of them that they're obviously older now. They were in their 20s when they would make these trips in college. One student in particular, it's very interesting. He said that he'd been trying to get the attention of the media about this guy for years. He said he would go there on these trips and collect the little red Mao book. He would buy as many as he could on these trips, saying that they were, souvenirs. Tim Walz would. And he said it was very apparent. He just had this, he adored communism and would talk about it in conversation. These students could pick up on that.
Are you serious?
And this student tried, even when he was running for Congress, to say there's more to this guy that you guys
killed so many more people than Hitler that it's not even close.
Yes.
Not a defense of Hitler, who was evil.
Yeah.
But Mao is the greatest mass murderer in history.
He's also married. His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on.
But
I was in this country during that campaign. It was less than a year ago. I never heard anybody say that.
But again, you have in Minnesota what has happened. We have a new state flag.
Wait. Do you think? I'm sorry. I'm just mesmerized by this.
There's a lot of questions. I agree.
Questions?
Yeah. But the problem is there's not anybody looking for answers, it seems like.
Well, they want to kill themselves. So they're doing a great job. I get it. I mean, ultimately, I just have to say this as a white man. I do blame the liberal whites. They want to kill themselves and their kids. That's what they're into. I don't know what you see it in Britain. So I'm not into suicide, so I'm opposed, but they're the ones doing this, and Walz is a perfect example. So, but why would you're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
You're probably pretty sick in Nike. It's hard to blame you for feeling that way. Any company that worships Colin Kaepernick, any company that shills for the lunacy of the left social agenda is clearly not on your side. In fact, they're your enemy. You need an alternative. XXXY Athletics is the far better choice. It's the only athletic brand committed to fighting for free speech, women's sports, and the truth. Honesty, the truth. They're not going to lie to you. For example, did you know that 80% of Americans oppose letting men play in women's sports? That's not a radical view. It's a moderate, sensible view rooted in biology. But woke corporations like Nike make you feel like a lunatic for saying obvious things like men are men and women are women. That is tyranny. How can you fight back? By abandoning the companies promoting it and by embracing companies like XXXY Athletics. It's an American company. It's not opposed to the United States or to telling the truth. Head to thetruthfits.com to learn a lot more and use the code Tucker25 for 25% off.
And what's interesting is, again, we're focusing over at Alpha News on these stories. There's supposed to be a congressional hearing about all of this, and it's kind of just gone nowhere. Sadly, we also know, I've spoken to a couple people that served with Tim Walz in Nebraska in that guard unit, and they suspect, and we've done stories and tried to reach out to Walz for comment, but they suspect that perhaps he took their standard operating procedure, the SOP, for the howitzer army tank. He was assigned to this tank. It was nuclear capable, and this was all laid out in the SOP that goes missing while he's there. And
the manual goes missing?
Right, and they had talked to the FBI about this as well. There's so many questions.
What does that mean? Why did they talk to the FBI?
They think that he was traveling back and forth from China at this time, and then we also know that this howitzer...
Wait.
I know I sound crazy right now.
No, you don't sound crazy at all. You're recounting the facts.
Yeah.
You are saying that men he worked with in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI because they believed he had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government?
They suspect that he did. And
well, they suspected to the point that they went to the FBI.
Well, this was all when all these stories are coming out finally about his background, and they're like, maybe we should talk about this. These are guys that back then didn't report this. This was in the early 90s, and they always talked about it amongst themselves. And I think that they weren't completely aware of, the potential threat something like this could pose, but they always thought this was very strange. And then China started producing almost a carbon copy of this military tank a couple of years later.
Come on. For real?
According to all of our research.
Did the Minneapolis Star-Tribune break this story?
Oh, no. No. They haven't touched much of this. In fact, actually, when they reported it's Tim Walz goes to China with these kids, and it's this great travel company he started. I think it was a very small story even addressing this at all.
And he chose to be married on the 5th anniversary of a massacre of peaceful protesters. Oh, man, this is super dark.
I realize too that some of it seems like impossible to believe. But again, being trained as a reporter, I know how this works. You talk to people, you verify things, you source things, and I feel very confident always in all of our information. And that's what is always so frustrating to me, that this should be the front page of the Star Tribune basically every day. But instead, the Star Tribune is run by a former commissioner of Governor Walz. He's the CEO and publisher, and it's truly unbelievable, the stories they put out. It's just turned into pure propaganda.
The Star Tribune is run by a former Walz commissioner?
It is. Steve Groves was his commissioner for years, and I don't think this relationship actually exists anywhere in the country between a governor and a publisher of the largest newspaper, but somehow in Minnesota that's allowed.
Who votes? So Minnesota has not thrived under the leadership of Tim Walz. It's gotten much worse. You were telling me today about people you know, and I know people too, who've moved from Minnesota to Iowa. Yeah. And no offense to Iowa, it's like the nicest people in the world. It also has the worst weather of any state. It's totally flat. Minnesota is just beautiful. Again, I'm not beating up on Iowa. I really do love Iowa. I spent a lot of time there, but Minnesota is kind of the dream. Iowa's like sturdy farm people and all that. If you're seeing a migration from Minnesota to Iowa, Minnesota is in serious trouble. Is this fair?
Oh, thousands of people have left. Tens of thousands of people have left Minnesota.
Crazy.
I know so many people even in my neighborhood that have moved.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.